about organic agriculture in Ecuador, the history and perspectives of it. My English is not perfect, so if there's something you don't understand, just ask. Okay? Okay, we don't have a lot of time, so I will just jump in the subject. We live here in a very particular place in the planet. It's a very special region we will call the Equatorial Andes. You know, the Andes mountains are the longest mountain range in the planet, coming from north of Colombia to the Antarctica, mostly. And we have different regions within this great mountain range. For example, in Peru and Bolivia, it's very, very dry. 70% of the country is a desert. While here in Colombia and Ecuador, it's very humid. We have, for example, the spot with the highest amount of rainfall in the planet. Combine this region, which is Colombia, Ecuador, and the northern part of Peru, we have also the highest biodiversity count in the planet. And we have, of the 20 climates of the planet, we have 18 in this region. So here in Ecuador, we live in a place where we can walk 20 minutes and be in a different climate, which is very strange. And of course, this means there's a lot of cultural diversity also, and a lot of planting diversity. In the beginning of the 20th century, humanity began discovering that plants, domesticated plants, didn't just appear anywhere in the world, but there are hotspots of plant domestication. There are eight places in the planet where most plants we use today were first domesticated. And this region is one of those places. 35 important plants that we eat today in the world were domesticated here. The only region that compares to the Equatorial Andes is Southeast Asia, tropical Asia. Has a similar count for domesticated plants. So, how this thing began? What was agriculture like in the beginning? We think that people were able to establish themselves and stop being nomads here before they discovered agriculture. Because at the end of the glaciation, there were already forests here, so abundant in food that people could establish in a place for months, or maybe a couple of years, just harvesting whatever they found around. And when they lived in these little villages that they started forming, they were very clean, and they will put all their garbage in one spot. We know that because archaeologists have found these piles of old garbage. And of course, they didn't have beer cans and plastic bags and plastic bottles. It was all organic garbage. Do you know what happens when you pile up organic garbage in one spot? What happens? Yeah, when you accumulate organic garbage in one place, what happens there? It decomposes into something we call compost, which is actually very fertile soil. You can do this experiment. Put just organic garbage in a like a plastic container, leave it for some months, open it again, and you will see soil there. Organic garbage turns it into soil. So people were piling up. At the time, there was a division in the roles of genders, meaning that males will go to hunt, and females were in charge in finding fruits, roots, young leaves to eat as vegetables. So women were roaming the forest in groups, exposed to some dangers in the forest, and then they were doing this thing, piling up the garbage of the food in one spot in the little village. And one day, some of these seeds that they were throwing there as garbage sprouted there, and a tree began growing. So they began to notice that, and they said, wow, this is very smart. If we can have the plants around our homes, we don't have to go into the forest anymore. So they began going in the forest, cutting pieces of plants and trying to plant them in the ground. And with some important plants like cassava, yucca, for example, this works. That's how you plant yucca. You just cut a piece of the stem and you plant it again, and a new cassava plant will grow up. And that's how women invented agriculture, both in Southeast Asia and in the Ecuadorial Andes, and maybe in other places too. So that was the beginning of it. Making an historical jump, 500 years ago, when Spanish conquerors came to this place, they came with an agriculture they knew, an agricultural system that was invented in Mesopotamia 10,000 years ago. This system was perfect for Mesopotamia, which was a region very dry, with very little forest left, very rocky, with water in the rivers, but not enough water in the places where people wanted to grow food. So the people in Mesopotamia invented a system of agriculture consisting in dividing the land into squares of land, each one property of a family, then killing everything in that piece of land with fire, etc. Then plowing, opening that rocky soil with animals and plows so the soil softened up. And then putting irrigation and planting one seed, for example wheat, which is the most common in Mesopotamia even now. That is the Mesopotamic model of agriculture. And what I just described, if you think about it, is what we think agriculture is. Isn't it? When I was younger, that was agriculture for me. You make a square, you kill everything, you plow it, you put water and a seed, and boom, you have agriculture. This is what we do today, everywhere in the world. From Iceland to the Arctic region, from India to the Alps to the United States to here, we do the same thing. We make a square, we kill everything, we plow, we put water and a plant, and we have agriculture. The problem with this is that it's very destructive for the soil. It is, in most places in the planet, completely unsustainable. Meaning that after some years of doing this, depending on where you are, it will be just a few years or maybe decades of doing this. You will destroy the soil so much you cannot keep cultivating anymore. And it is always like that. In Ecuadorian soils, using plow tractors, machines, and this system I just described will destroy the soil in just 5 to 10 years. In the Amazonic region, it will take 2 years to completely destroy it. In the very fertile plains of the Corn Belt in the US or the plains in Europe, that will take decades before it erodes, but eventually it will be destroyed. By doing this kind of agriculture, humanity has destroyed 40% of the fertile soils of the planet in the last 50 years. And this is really scary. And this is something we don't hear in the news normally. We see some destruction around, but we don't realize the scale this has happened in the planet. So we have lost nearly half the fertile soils of the planet. The bad news is for nature to recover the fertility of these soils. It can take around 400 years, which is a lot of time, if we leave nature alone to recover. But the good news is if we act smart and apply principles of agroecology, which is more than organic agriculture. Agroecology is producing food, copying from nature, trying to understand how nature works and working like that. We can do the same job of recovering these soils in just 10 years, which is like way faster, and we should do that. So in my country, we are trying to find how to do this. We are turning to look to the ancient cultures of our land, because we know they manage the land in an ecological way. So how do they do that? How did they do that? Because when the Spanish arrived here, they say there was no agriculture here. But we know today that there was an amazing amount of people. More people lived in the Americas at the time of the conquest than in Europe or Africa. Only in Asia there was a similar number of people living as in the Americas. Okay? So food production was going quite well for so many people to live here. But the problem is that they didn't plow the land. They didn't make the square, kill everything, plow and put one seed. They didn't do that. So Spanish conquerors believed that this was no agriculture. What they saw was kind of like a jungle. And they said, okay, these people are lazy. They don't do agriculture. They don't have the plow. They don't know the wheel. But we know today that these systems of food production of the ancient peoples of the Americas were very productive. So how do they do that? And to answer this, I will show you just one example. Around the lakes here in the highlands, there was a lot of lakes in the past. Now we have just a few left. They will, like for example, here's the lake, okay, and here's land. So what they will do is to transform this land manually into mounds like this. Okay? So the water will come, they will manage the water so it comes here. Okay? And they will grow the plants here. No tractors, no plow, only human work with hands. Okay? The amazing thing of this is that irrigation here is achieved by a principle called capillarity. Have you heard about that? It's the thing that happens when you put like a sponge in a little water, it will suck the water up. So the water will come from here, because this is humid, right? So water will go up and the plants will feed very well. Why? Because today when we put water in the plants, we put it always from above, like the rain, okay? Because we believe that it's the rain that will feed the plants. And we don't realize that what really happens in nature is that every time it rains in nature, most of the water will go underground. Okay? And the plants will send the roots down, and this water will come up by capillarity, and the plants will feed from down, not from above. With our systems of irrigation, modern systems of irrigation, the plants need to compete for superficial water, because we put all the irrigation above. So plants, instead of sending the roots down, send the roots to the sides, trying to catch all the superficial water. And they compete. So if you open a manual on agriculture, a book, it will tell you that, for example, lettuces need to be planted 50 centimeters apart. Okay? Otherwise they will compete. But when you do this, the plants will send the roots down, and you can pack them together. Okay? Putting far more plants in the same amount of space than with our modern systems of agriculture. A second advantage to this is that you pack the plants so much together that weeds don't have an opportunity to grow. So weeding is very easy. You don't need to spray dangerous chemicals to kill the weeds, because the plants of food grow so much together they don't have enough space to grow the weeds. In this system of food production, every single plant will be smaller than in modern food production, because they are packed together. Okay? So you will not have gigantic cabbages, but you will have more food, because the plants are packed together, and you have like a rack of food, like a carpet of food. Okay? So even if the individual plant is smaller, the amount of food produced by area is higher than in modern food production. And people in the past here never planted one thing alone, never just wheat, for example. A very good example is how we used to grow maize, corn in the Americas. It will always go with beans and pumpkins. Yes? This is called the three sister system. So you will have corn, maize, growing there, okay, and beans climbing. And beans fix nitrogen from the atmosphere, so it will provide nitrogen for the corn growing. And then you have the pumpkins with their big leaves growing, covering all the soil. So again, no weeds can grow well there. The soil is completely protected. You look underneath the leaves of the squashes and pumpkins, and you see the soil is humid, healthy, growing, developing more fertility. And you have 3 foods in one spot. And you have the salad, you have the carbohydrate, and you have the protein growing together. A complete meal in one spot. Today, we don't do that. We just plant corn alone, destroying the soil. So these are very interesting examples. And this system has been recovered in the highlands of Bolivia with support of the Bolivian government, showing that it controls climate inside of the crop field, avoiding a lot of diseases, and is very, very productive. But the truly amazing thing about this system is how they did in the coastal regions, in the very hot regions of the coastal provinces of our countries. They did the same thing, but here in the highlands, this is 80 centimeters high, up to a meter high, okay? And this can be actually 10 meters wide, maybe. And they can go long. The biggest one we have here in Ecuador, it runs for, I think it's 400 meters long, okay? But in the coast, they were like 3 to 5 meters high, 30 to 50 meters wide, and kilometers long. So big that people actually build their houses above this thing. And they will plant their crops during the rainy season. They will plant their crops here, okay? And this was with water. And then in the dry season, this will dry up. Oops, this is not a good one. Okay. So this will dry up, leaving a lot of organic garbage here, like fish bones, dead animals, lime, algae, a lot of things that they will take from here to there to put fertility for their crops there. Okay? After that, they will plant here in the dry season. Because of this, there's enough humidity left inside that it will last without need of further irrigation for all the dry season for a very good crop. At the end of the dry season, they will harvest the crops here, but leave all the leftovers, the stem of the plant, etc. They will leave it there. When this is covered by water again, all this garbage, the leftovers of the harvest, there will transform into food for fish, crabs, shrimps, shells, etc. So a lot of these animals will move here and reproduce like crazy. And there will be an abundance of fish and related animals. And these people will come in their little canoes to fish, to catch the fish and the shrimps and the crabs, a lot of food there. And they are planting here. Year after year, this never ever loses fertility. It improves fertility year after year. It's an amazing way of producing food. It's what in ecology we call a closed cycle. It never needs an input of energy or fertility from outside. It produces everything you need to keep it going forever. That is what the word sustainability means. You can do this forever. It has the ability to sustain itself forever. Modern investigations have discovered that these systems were created even to withstand the worst climates, what we have every 14 years here called El Niño event, when the climate goes so crazy that today in Ecuador, a lot of people lose their homes to inundations, all the crops are lost, and things like that. In the past, when El Niño event came, these guys were laughing at it. They were prepared for it. Okay. That's a very good example of an ancient system of food production. Another one comes from the Amazon region. 20 years ago, all the scientists believed that in the Amazon region never live a lot of people, because the modern way of producing food in the Amazon region is to cut down the forest completely, you know, make the square, kill everything on it, plow it. Okay, today you put the fertilizer, the agrotoxics, the pesticide, the fungicide, all that, and after 2 years the soil is so destroyed you have to move away and destroy more forest. That's what we do today. And if the people in the past did something similar, investigators say that there never could have been more than, let's say, 1 million people living in the whole Amazon. But then we discovered that the Amazon was full of big cities in the past, with a lot of people living there. So how did they feed themselves? Well, they practiced something that we have come to talk, to call the food forest system. What they did basically is that they went into the forest, okay, with a lot of corn, maize, and they would just spread the maize like that, without plowing or making holes or anything. They would just throw the maize like that, okay? After that, they will cut the undergrowth, all the little plants. And then with the undergrowth cut, they will look at the trees and they will say, okay, this is a very useful tree. With this, my daughter will build her house. So this also is a very useful tree. It produces food for us, fruits, for example, or nuts. But this one is not so useful, so cut it down. So they will every time cut some trees to get enough light inside of the forest and replace them. Mostly with a very important palm tree called chonta that produces more food than corn. Okay? They will plant some trees that were important for them. All the undergrowth they cut will rot and be incorporated in the soil, providing fertility. And the corn and the cassava will begin growing there wildly. Okay? After a year or two, the trees will be so grown again. This will resemble a forest again. They cannot keep growing corn there, so they will move and do the same thing in another spot. And this is a cycle that will continue for hundreds of years. So the whole forest of the Amazon region was transformed from the natural state into a food forest. A forest that, for all practical reasons, looks like a natural forest, but produces far more food. Not only for people, but also for animals. So there's an abundance of animals. There's so much animals that people have to hunt them to keep the populations low. And there's so much food for everyone. Okay, so populations were very high in the Amazon. Just to give you an idea of what this means, an hectare of food forest will produce only in chonta palm more carbohydrates, more food than an hectare of corn. But you don't have only chonta palm there. You also have a lot of fruit trees, a lot of nuts, and a lot of animals living there that you can hunt. So overall, that hectare of food forest produces far more food than the modern way of producing food in our fields of grain. Instead of having just one floor, just grain or just lettuces, you have 7 floors of food production. So it's like you have 7 hectares piled up, packed in 1 hectare of soil. It's an amazing way to do it, and it's not only for forest peoples here in Ecuador. This was known all over the world, actually. For example, they say that in North America, the indigenous peoples of the eastern coast, a family of indigenous people from there, in 5 days in the autumn, harvesting nuts, will harvest enough food for 1 year. Just 5 days of harvesting food. Okay? Similar in Europe, a family of ancient inhabitants of France, Gauls for example, will feed the family with just 1 acre of tree. An old tree will produce enough food for 1 family. So, we believe that these systems that come from the past are actually the best hope we have for the future. These systems of food production not only produce more food for us, human beings, but also keeps nature going, keep fertility in the soil, and assure that we will have a sustainable food production. Okay? So, what we can do to call these systems back into existence? We are part of an independent network of people working in the field, farmers, people that came from the city to live in the countryside, and also indigenous people, Afro-Ecuadorians, different kinds of people that are trying to do things like this today. There are several stories of success. The most exciting one was actually how we saved rice production in the coast of Ecuador. Rice is not a plant native from here, from Ecuador. It comes from Asia. And here in Ecuador, rice production is very sad thing to look at. They will make the rice paddy, which is basically something like this, and you put water on it, and the rice plants will grow there. Okay? And they will plant only rice. And then you have weeds, you have pests, and you have fungi that come to live there, because this is a monoculture that natures don't like. So nature will try to fight this. And people will try to fight nature by putting stronger and stronger chemicals. And those chemicals destroy faster the soil, okay? And they end up in the food that we eat, destroying our systems. Mainly agrochemicals destroy our hormonal systems. Okay, so what's the solution to this? We investigated and discovered that in ancient times in Asia, people will put ducks, yes, like Donald Duck. They will put ducks. I will try to draw that. Let's see that. Okay, and a fish called lamprey. And this was ecological and sustainable. So we tried to copy this system the past year, 2012, by putting not Chinese ducks, but Ecuadorian ducks, which are bigger, and a local fish called chavi that people really like to eat here, to see what happens, just to see what happens, okay? And we did a test field, meaning that we cultivated one spot with chemicals, the normal way, and another spot without chemicals and with the ducks and fish. The idea of this is quite genius. The ducks, well, you have to control the amount of water you put inside of the rice paddy. The idea is that the feet of the duck will be just touching the bottom of the paddy. The duck cannot be standing or floating here. They have to be just touching the bottom of the paddy. Why? Because by doing so, they will create a muddy water. Very dark, muddy water. You understand? Otherwise, the soil compacts and the water is clear, you can see the bottom. But when you put the ducks like this, you don't see the bottom. It's completely dark because the feet of the duck are like creating this mud. And this is very beneficial. First of all, because this is the natural condition of wild rice, the ancestral rice. So the rice, being the water so muddy and full of nutrients, will put the roots not only inside of the soil, but also in the water directly, growing bigger. Second reason, the water gets so dark that the seeds of weeds cannot sprout. So there's almost no weeding. Okay? Weeds will not grow because it's so dark there. Then the ducks will eat the insects that come to attack the rice and destroy all the insects that come to attack the rice. When we did this, we did it the last year, as I told you, we in Ecuador had a plague of African snails that destroyed 30% of the rice in the country, which is very much. And we did this in a region that was completely attacked by the African snails. And when we asked the producers what happened, they said the ducks spend the whole day looking for snails. They love it. So in these systems, snails were completely unable to cause harm to rice. The ducks were fighting for any snail they found. The other reason is that the ducks will shit, sorry. And this is food for the rice. And the fish will shit too. And this is also food for the rice. And the duck will eat the fish. And we put a nitrogen fixer, an aquatic plant called azolla, that floats in the water, fixes nitrogen from the atmosphere, which is more food for the rice, and also feeds the fish. Okay? So the azolla feeds the fish feeds the duck. Okay? The duck eats the weeds that can sprout, and eats all the insects, and also puts manure for the rice. It was a very crazy experiment we did. We are not scientists. But we tried to do it very well, taking measurements every week of how the plants were growing. And the result was amazing. We didn't put any kind of fertilizer in this. Nothing at all, not even organic fertilizer, nothing. And we didn't do any pest control at all. And this paddy produced more rice than the chemical one, just like that. It produced more rice than the other one. The results are in this magazine if you are curious about it, the results of this experiment. And then, when the moment came of selling this, we realized that the other rice paddy, the typical, the normal one, will sell around $500 of rice. Well, this one will sell $500 of rice plus 200 ducks, plus 500 fishes, producing around $1,700 in earnings. That's more than 3 times the normal one. So who says organic agriculture is not as productive as conventional one? It's simply not true. And this is the most exciting experiment we have done, but we have done other experiments and all of them show the same thing. You produce more food with ecological systems and you produce more money too. So where's the problem, you will ask? Why isn't everyone cultivating this way? Well, there we hit the wall. This became quite famous here in Ecuador, and one day we were discussing on Twitter with representatives from the government, from the Ministry of Agriculture, and they were saying, you know, ecological food production is a nice idea, but you cannot do it in a big scale. And we were like, why? We have shown you with this experiment that it's possible to do it. And they said, yeah, we know about your little experiment, but we still think you cannot do this in a big scale. Why? We asked. And they said, okay, just make this calculation. We have in Ecuador X number of hectares of rice production. And you want to put 200 ducks per hectare. We will have each rice season, we have 2 harvests in the year here. We will have 2 times a year, 8 million ducks. And they say, what the hell are we going to do with 8 million ducks? And we were like, what? What are you talking about? What do you think we're going to make with 8 million ducks? We could, for example, stop eating so much chickens grown in those batteries in such cruel conditions, full of hormones and transgenic corn. We could stop eating that and have a better food. And food that comes from our farmers, not from a big industry. Then we understood, of course. For the most part, governments today are working not for the people, but for big corporations. So it's not in the interest of big corporations in the market to support things like this. Okay, you understand? And this is crucial right now, because we have climate change, because we have economic crisis, and petroleum is about to be gone. So we need to discover or invent food systems that can produce like this, improving every year, okay, in a sustainable way. Otherwise, humanity is stopped. We're in real trouble. And the power is in ourselves, in citizens. We need people to be awake and understand these things.
and make the most important political choice, which is how you spend your money. If we keep spending money in systems that destroy the planet, try to think about it. We are producing food in a way that destroys the resources we need to produce food. We cannot keep doing this, just like that. Sooner or later we will run out of the resources and there will be no food production in the planet. So we need to begin investing as consumers, as producers, and in systems like this one that can really produce for the future in a sustainable way. That is what we're trying to do in Ecuador. There's a lot of people doing this kind of thing without support from the government and clearly fighting against corporations that don't want this to happen. I was making a calculation this morning that we are around 14 million people in the country right now, okay? And every one of us will spend at least $100 a month in food. Think about the numbers. 14 million for 100 is like 1,400 millions every month. Where is all this money going? We have 30% of our population still as farmers in the countryside, and they are poor. They are very, very poor. And everyone is pulling out of the countryside, going to the cities to be poor in the cities because there's more opportunities there. What will happen in the countryside? Who will produce the food for the future? It's not a very smart thing we do, because right now, most of the money we spend, 70% of Ecuadorians are buying in the supermarket food that is processed, and most of it comes from overseas. So, sorry, but every time I spend $1 on a Coca-Cola, that is money that is going out of my country to make someone richer far away. Okay? And this is happening all over the planet. So what the what the ecological movement is proposing for the future is we have to produce in a sustainable way and we have to buy local. Every dollar you spend in food that comes from your place will return to you. Will keep the economy in your place strong enough to support your activities. Well, that's the idea. I don't know if you have any questions.